and welcome. Today I wanted to share my process for making 3 different journal covers. This is a tutorial of sorts for just the covers. Now I already started on that one, and then I had in mind to make 2 others, and I thought, well, I'll start recording because maybe this would be of interest to people. I have those 2 pieces of it's kind of like scrapbook paper, cardstock weight paper that I'm going to use on the inside covers. I'm going to cut them down to size, and then I'm going to use that strip of fabric to cover the spine. And so if you watched any of my other videos, you know that I don't really like to measure or use rulers. And this method I'm using with just marking it with my pencil and eyeballing one of the papers has worked really well for me, so I just mark it with my pencil. I cut it down to size on my cutting board, and then I use that as a template to cut the other piece for the back cover. So while I'm going to do that and come back, and while I am doing that, I'll just describe briefly how I made the cover. I followed a video by an artist named Erin Bishop, and I will link to her video down below because I followed her video pretty closely. And what happened was I put some tissue paper, I taped some tissue paper, not taped, I glued some tissue paper using matte medium onto the cover. And it was a pattern tissue paper that I wanted to show on the cover, but it didn't work out that way. It was very transparent, and it just sort of melted into the book cover. You couldn't see the pattern at all. So I decided to paint it, and I found Erin's video, and I decided to follow her technique. So she didn't use tissue paper. That's the only difference, really. And also that she was using an already made art journal. But anyway, I digress. I'll link to her video down below, as I said, because it's an easy one to follow. Now I have taped down my 2 pieces of scrapbook paper on each cover, inside and back, and again, no measuring, just approximately trim that or cut that and then tear it and then glue it down using the Fabri-Tac glue. I don't mind a little bit of fabric showing at the top and bottoms of the journals that I make, so I don't measure exactly, and I want a little bit of that fringe to show. And I'm using Fabri-Tac glue on this because the fabric that I'm using is it's a canvas fabric, and it's pretty strong, and the glue won't seep through as much. I've used this fabric a lot on spines, so I know that it won't show through. If I was using a thinner fabric, I probably would use my glue stick, because I really don't have a problem with glue sticks and thinner fabrics. And I'm going to sew in the signatures, so that will also, I mean, the fabric's not going to come off if it's got the signatures sewn into the spine like that. Hopefully that all makes sense. So I am putting a good amount of Fabri-Tac glue on there, and then I'm going to spread it out a little bit with my finger so that it hopefully covers. It doesn't look like it on the video, but it covered pretty much most of the fabric, but I'm also adding some in that place in the spine where the book bends when you open it and close it, because that's a place where you really want your glue to adhere, your fabric to adhere with the glue, because otherwise it creates like ugly sort of bump or bubble. So you can see the glue seep through a little bit, but you'll see later when it dries that it looks fine. I do spend a little more time off camera pressing those areas, as I mentioned, where the book bends. And I think you reach for a credit card or key card because I didn't have my bone folder handy, but I usually like to use a bone folder on there and just keep pressing in and pressing in until I make sure that it's really well adhered in there. And then, of course, I let it dry. And I think I worked on that a little bit more. So now I'm going to show you my second journal cover, and I'm going to use tissue paper again. I've sped up the video a bit because I didn't want this video to be too long. That's the tissue paper I chose to use. Now this time, something I didn't do with the other book cover I was just working on, I did not put any gesso on my book cover. It was a dark cover. So with this one, I put gesso on already off camera, and I'm hoping that this tissue paper will show up just like that. When I started recording this, I honestly did not know if this was going to work or not, but I thought, oh, I'll give it a try, and if not, I can just add paint over the top like I did the other one. But lo and behold, it worked. So I was really happy with that. Now, the other thing I want to say about tissue paper is this tissue paper is a little bit thicker than the one I used on the other cover. So I don't know where I got this particular tissue paper, but I think it was from something I ordered online, and it came in the mail wrapped in this beautiful paper. So like I said, you know how some tissue papers are really, really thin and some are a little bit thicker. Well, this one's a little bit thicker, but you hopefully noticed before that you can see my hand through it a little bit. So if you try this with a similar type of tissue paper, then just maybe put gesso or another color in your background if you want something with a color to show through. Hopefully that all makes sense. So I'm using matte medium. As you can see, I trimmed the tissue paper down to a manageable size, and I'm going to put matte medium under and over the top of the tissue paper. And I'm smoothing it out as best I can, again making sure it adheres to those places on the spine where the book opens and closes. And again, I'm smoothing it out as much as possible, but I do have a few wrinkles in there, and that does not bother me at all. I think it looks great in the end. Now, once I make sure that the front is well adhered and hopefully no bubbles and no gaps in my tissue. I don't want to spread it too much. If this was a thinner tissue paper, it would be tearing right now also. Okay, so after this, I'm going to put matte medium on the top of the tissue paper because I wanted to just keep working on the cover and finish that up, and then I'll put matte medium on the top of all the tissue paper and then let it dry really well. So I'm just going to fold over the paper as you see there, and because this book is so long, I have to kind of maneuver it a little bit, and I wanted to make sure I attached both sides at one time. I like to do one side, the left side, and then the right side, and then the top and bottom. I hope that makes sense. So it's a little bit like wrapping a present. Because the tissue paper is not as thick as fabric, it works well, this technique. And then, as I said, I'll finish that up, and then I will put some matte medium over the top of the cover and let it dry. And here I am, everything's dry. That's dry. And then this cover is all dry. Or actually, no, I take that back. it's not completely dry. I'm going to let it dry a little bit more, and in the meantime, I'm going to start working on my third cover. I'm going to use this grocery bag paper that I had been working on other projects. I had been working on top of this paper on other projects using paint, and often I will take my extra paint and just stencil it onto my under paper, or just use my paper as a palette, as it were. So my idea to make things simple is to make my cover the size of an 8.5 by 11 paper, and I decided to make it one signature. So I'm just figuring out how I'm going to trim this, and I'm using my metal ruler to just tear the cover. This is obviously going to be a bit of a grungy journal and cover, so I'm not concerned with making my cuts as straight, and it all turns out fine, as you'll see later on. Now this paper doesn't look that great right now, I will admit. It's got some interesting bits to it. I really like circles, so I thought I would use that part. But I'm going to make it better, as you'll see, and I had that in mind already, that I would make it look a little bit nicer. But it's still going to be a bit of a sort of grungy, I call it casual journal, because it's got a paper bag cover. So I'm going to use some gesso to tone down bits of it, especially the black parts and the big blue blob on the bottom left corner. So again, I've sped this up, and I don't know that I have a lot to say during this part. I don't want to ramble on and on too much. I'm not worried about the cover being perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. And just really, I'm kind of experimenting with this because I haven't done this particular process before, as far as the painting on the cover of the of a grocery bag. I have made other grocery bag journal covers, but they are more more thought out, I guess. So I wanted my circles to still be there, which is why I'm using putting the gesso on in the circular motion. But I also don't want it to look weird, if that makes sense. So there you can see I went ahead a little bit because I just added the gesso on the right and left. And now I'm making some pencil lines. I really like that effect. I'm using a Lyra not water soluble pencil to go around those circles. And if anything that if there's one thing I'm not happy about with this cover in the end, is I really wish that I had used a different sort of pencil, because you'll see there I tried to use water to kind of move those or make them darker, the lines, but that didn't work. So I just left it, and it looks fine, but I kind of wanted them a little bit darker. So then I also thought I would use some letters in the background, and I'm using black paint with a little makeup sponge to dab the paint on through the stencil. Now, I also didn't want that black to be too dark. I just went over some black with gesso on the right hand side, so of course I don't want to add a stark black again. So I added those letters on the left, and then again I did some on the right, and I'll probably jump ahead a little bit at this point, or just in a minute, because it was I thought the letters were too dark black. So what I ended up doing is, instead of using more gesso, I just used some sandpaper and I sanded it down a little bit. I wanted to use a leaf pattern on the front, and so that's why I have that stencil out, and that's also why I didn't want my letters to be too dark in the background, because I thought they would be too bold, and I wanted the leaves and the flowers to stand out more than my black letters. So again, I'm being very casual. I'm thinking a little bit about where I want the placement of these leaves and flowers, but I'm not overthinking it. And also, I know that the flowers are green too. If you wanted to, you could make the flowers another color, like a real flower color. But and I thought about doing that, but I decided to just go ahead with the green and keep going and make my green flowers. So at this point, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. So I continued to add the green flowers, and then I'm showing you how I had I used the sandpaper to tone down those letters. I think I toned them down like a little bit too much. And then I put my stencil back over the green leaves and flowers and did that over again. And so then I was looking at the cover and I thought I really needed a color like a pink, as you see there. And so I brought out another flower stencil and I decided to add some flowers to my cover. I really like the brightness of the pink that adds a cheeriness to the cover. And one thing I wanted to say about this is, I have said this many times, that I can't draw well, and I hate to say it in this way, but I really just don't have a desire to learn how to draw at this point. I never say never. Maybe someday I will, but right now I don't. So I like to use my stencils, but if you know how to draw and you want to draw leaves or flowers on your cover, of course, you can draw and paint them on, and that would look great. So again, just adding flowers, pink flowers here and there. I wanted them to be bright, so I have to go over them a little bit more from time to time. And I'm doing some really messy stenciling, and I'm okay with that. I'm going to add a detail that I think makes it look a little bit better later on with some paint pens, and I'll show you that just in a moment. I'll skip ahead to that part, just continuing adding the flowers. Okay, at this point I decided to go back to this cover and finish that up. I am going to add fabric in the middle and these two pieces of cardstock that I've already cut down to size, just like I did before. But this time I'm using a thinner fabric, so I'm okay with my glue stick, as I mentioned before. But I want to make sure I thoroughly cover all the parts that the fabric are going to go on with my glue stick, so it will adhere well. This is a thinner fabric, so it works fine, as you'll see. And the other thing I'm doing differently is, as you can see, I'm gluing the fabric on first, and then I'm going to glue the scrapbook paper on top instead of the way I did it before. So this fabric is, obviously it has stripes, and I have said many times I don't worry about things being straight or precise, but those lines really, and there you see me using my bone folder, but I really didn't like those lines being so wobbly and crooked, so I went back and straightened them out, and then I will make sure I have a lot of glue on there, so I'm able to pick it up and then glue it back down before it dries. And then I do trim up the top of that fabric a little bit. It's a little long. Can't remember if I show that on camera or not, but I do trim that up. But you know, it's not really that bad for me anyway. Using Fabri-Tac on the scrapbook paper, it's a thicker scrapbook paper, and Fabri-Tac does work really well to hold those papers in place. Okay. So while that other cover dries, I went back to finish this one, and I decided to use a gold paint pen around those pink flowers and a green pen around the green leaves and flowers. I've already done the right hand side, and I'm just showing you how I did it. Very loose and casual again. I don't need that to be perfect. I like the look of it. Kind of loose, and I think it turned out really nicely. I decided to use some fabric on the spine and also on the inside cover. I've made similar journals like this before with grocery bag covers, and just attach some fabric to the inside and some to the spine, and I think it looks nice. I'll show you the spine fabric in just a moment. I think it makes a nice contrast with the cover, but the inside fabric I decided to use a different one because I thought it was too heavy and dark and didn't match the inside brightness. So I'll do a little wrap up in just a moment, and you'll see how they turned out. Okay, here are my 3 covers. So I finished this one. I really love the way that turned out. I think it looks so cute. And I did the zigzag stitching around to add a nice little border. This is what the inside looks like. I'm going to fill it with some paper. Each one of these, well, these 2 will have 1 signature. I think this one's going to have 2, but I haven't gotten that far yet. So as a reminder, here's the way this one looks. I'm really pleased with that one too. It has nice texture and a shine to it. And then this one is made similarly but looks so different. I love the way that turned out too. So there are my 3 covers. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.